I read somewhere after Monica Goodling testified, you said that you believed that there was a smoking gun and that her comments had led you to believe that a bit. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I found her testimony to be really interesting. I mean, I was hoping she would give more specific information as to White House involvement. I mean, it's clear to me that if nobody at the Justice Department takes ownership of putting us on the list, the only place it can come from is the White House. For political appointees, that's the only possible place. She was a White House liaison between the Justice Department and the White House. She knew all the players over there. And I believe, I've stated this publicly, I'll state it again, that there is a smoking gun memoranda or an email server somewhere. You know, they've conveniently lost up to 5 million emails. If you know anything about forensics, those emails aren't really lost. They're out there. You can recover them. And I know that someday, hopefully soon, they'll be able to recover them. And she told me, or what I took from her testimony was that the Gonzalez knew a lot more than what he let out to. And that the deputy, Paul McNulty, was not being truthful when he testified. And I found her testimony to be of some help.
And maybe you can just, for the record, explain, it's very different, U.S. attorneys or political appointments versus what she was saying she'd been allowed to do, which was make political decisions about civil servants.
Right. I hired 29, I think, assistant U.S. attorneys. Almost all of those are career positions. So these are people that are going to be in my office for 10, 20, 30 years even. And I knew that you cannot ask them about party affiliation. That there's certain questions you cannot ask of an applicant. Religion, whether they have children, political status. I mean, there are certain questions you just are off base. I mean, you just can't do it. She didn't seem to understand that, and she appeared to set up these political litmus tests, trying to keep out liberals, trying to keep out Democrats. She would Google people, and I found that to be not just troubling, but appalling and in violation of federal civil law, which, you want the American people to have confidence in the career people, that they're coming in through merit. They may have some, political leanings. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, this is America. This is a diverse country. But I found that admission against her own interest to be really appalling, that she would exclude people just because of their perceived ideology.
Now, you were apparently being considered for a job. One of the emails they released, I think, on Tuesday, redacted who sent it, but it was sent to Kyle Sampson and said, what do you think about David Iglesias? Would you hire him? Which I didn't really understand because it inspired you. And they said, yeah, I would. Who sent that email? What were they thinking of hiring? Have you heard about this?
I have no idea. That's news to me.
No.
I mean, I do know that I was considered, and this is all after the fact, folks. I didn't know this at the time, but I was being considered for the U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., the U.S. Attorney for Southern District of New York. And then what I did know about was Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security, because they did call me about that. I was interested for about a nanosecond, and I didn't really want to go back to Washington. I wanted to stay in the American government. And then they offered me, or they wanted to know if I was interested in being the director of the Executive Office of U.S. Attorneys, which in retrospect would have been a miserable job, because that would have been me making the phone calls, firing my colleagues, and not knowing why.
So you would have done that?
I would have had to have. It would have been awful. And I'm glad Mike Battle, and by the way, Mike Battle, I still consider him a friend. He was the messenger. I don't blame him at all. And he's resigned. He's moved on. And I think the body count now is 5 high-level people at the Justice Department have resigned, and I anticipate there'll be a few more.
Now, this week, Congress issued subpoenas for Harry Mears and Sarah Taylor, and now I think trying to work out a compromise with the White House. The last I heard, the White House said they would do behind closed doors if there was no record of it, if they didn't have to swear in, and the other.
It's just worthless then. I mean, look, very little of what the Justice Department does is top secret. I mean, there are a small class of cases involving, spies and terrorists, which are legitimately off limits for a while. I mean, ultimately, the public has a right to know. But 99% of what the Justice Department does is open, and the public has a right to know what's say that there's no transcript is ludicrous, because you need to lock in what the person said. And that tells me that they're concerned about what the testimony will reveal.
I'm going to wrap up with one final question, but I guess my biggest question is, you were very loyal to the Bush administration. You were a Republican. They described you, I think, more than once as an up-and-comer and someone who was going places. What did you believe then, and what do you believe now about this administration?
Well, I could write a book on that. In fact, maybe I will. Boy, that was a pregnant pause, wasn't it? To be honest with you, Julie, I'm still processing this. I was raised to believe that loyalty is very important, but I learned along the way that loyalty has limits. And I started seeing a certain arrogance, a certain willingness to try to place DOJ above the law, or the administration above the law. And I'm old enough to barely remember Watergate. Those of you in the room probably remember clearly the problem with, if you believe you're above the law, a lot of really bad things happen. And I'm still processing the damage that could be done to the rule of law and to notions like the Geneva Convention, which my former boss called quaint. It's not quaint, it's controlling law, and it's what the international community has stated is the governing law. So overall, I've been, the loyal Bushy thing, I think I'd rather be known as loyal to the Constitution than loyal to the rule of law. And, just always.
I guess I lied. I have one more question. You told me you're not going to run for office. You're out of politics.
Right.
So I'm curious, are you planning, you used to be a registered independent, if I recall correctly, back in the 80s.
Sure.
Are you going to remain a registered Republican?
Oh, I don't know.